Don't measure up. But by now, I bet you're wondering what kind of frightening drill sergeant teacher will the instructor be, right? Well, not to worry, your instructor will be either a civilian native speaker or a highly educated military language instructor, or MLI.
Then you have your MLIs, military language instructors like me, guys in uniform. Been through the course, and we've done the mission. Remember how hard it was to learn a foreign language. You can make it here, you can make it through anything.
And there are about 1,900 of these guys. Where did they find them?
Our instructors and faculty come from around the world, from over 90 different countries, as a language training facility that trains in 17 different languages. We have linguists, instructors from over 90 countries that come here to Monterey to support that training institute.
First-class international staff, musicians even. It's really impressive. But let's not pretend that it's all smooth sailing at the DLI. The atmosphere in the classroom can get tense. In the early days, it's high stress with the fast pace of learning. Cultural clashes happen as well, even between students and teachers. Different political views, different outlooks on life. It certainly isn't straightforward.
Well, here's a good example of it. I was like a month into the course, and my instructor said, read this passage, and it was in Russian. So I read it in Russian, and she said, all right, what does it say? So I swapped to English, because I was going to translate it. But she said, no, say it in Russian. Explain your idea in Russian. And I was like, frick, all right, cool. And I'm trying to piece together some things, my grammar's awful and so on. I start speaking, and the moment I started talking, she started putting her head down in her hands on her desk and rubbing her face. And I finished, and she said, that was absolute. And I said, I'm sorry. I mean, I'm 19, and I've never learned a language before.
So let's find out more about what actually goes on inside the classroom, including that scream and scribble that I mentioned earlier.
Fühlen Sie sich auch vom Auf und Ab der Aktienmärkte überfordert? Hallo, ich bin Harry Weinfurt. Sie kennen mich noch als Moderator von der Preis.
No matter what language you are learning, it is going to be insanely fast-paced and difficult. Classes are Monday to Friday and pretty much all day long.
So because we were military, then our day always started really early in the morning, and we'd have morning formation where we would do uniform inspections, we'd have announcements, that sort of thing. And then we'd be in the classroom by about 7:30, 8 o'clock. And we had 6 total hours of language learning throughout the day.
Thankfully, you do get a 10-minute break every hour, and you knock off at 3:30 in the afternoon, but there's no relaxing yet. In fact, that is not even half of what the day looks like. Just wait and see. Another interesting thing that happens is, depending on your language, there may also be a lot of different ranks in your class. So if you are a private, you could easily have a captain or even a sergeant sitting right next to you. So it's got to be fun, right? Never mind the mix of different branches all learning together in the same room. I wonder what this was like.
It was always interesting navigating the different military cultures. There was Air Force, Army, Marine, and we had one Navy most of the time. And each branch has different standards and, different things they have to do during the week to fulfill their military purpose. And so it was interesting seeing everyone try to balance that with the language learning.
So first day, first class, first lesson, what's that like?
It's your first day, the teacher comes in, we're all nervous, we're sitting in the class, and I've never spoken to a Russian person before. The teacher comes in speaking Russian, and I'm like, I have no idea what you're saying. Like, I don't know what to do. But initially, they switch to English because they know that you don't understand anything. You go over the alphabet, you practice your handwriting, and they teach you all the cursive and all that. After 2 days, they say, okay, we bless you with the alphabet and make the cross symbol. Now let's start learning things. We were expected to know everything now, so we started learning words and grammar. But it depends. If you have Arabic, they spend more time on that. They call it sound and script. It's an initial 3-week course where you go over the Arabic alphabet.
Yeah, so for languages with a different script, like Arabic, they'll spend up to a month on basic alphabet and sounds before even getting to the vocabulary. if you caught that thing, Jackson, sound and script, this is a daily session before classes where students are introduced to the most basic vocabulary to get used to what the script actually looks like. Apparently this class has earned the nickname Scream and Scribble. I'll leave it to your imagination to figure out why. But the idea is to prep the soldiers for success in the challenging weeks to come, because at some point, even the instructions in the class are going to be all in Arabic. And we'll see some examples of what actual classroom activities look like in just a second. Okay, so an important question from me at this point. What percentage of the time are you hearing only the target language versus getting taught actually in English? Because if you remember from my video on the Mormon Missionary Training Center, those guys have a very strict no English rule right from the beginning.
The majority of the instruction was in kind of a mix of English and Korean. When we first started, there was a lot more English, but as we learned the language, we got more Korean. All of our professors would speak in Korean and then explain in English again. And so the grammar bits, every day we had maybe a paragraph or a little dialogue piece that was in Korean that we were studying from. And there would be new pieces of grammar, new verb endings, new ways of saying things that are talked about in that paragraph, and we would learn from that. And all the vocabulary for that day would be in that paragraph. So they would be teaching from these paragraphs every day.
In the beginning, they do speak a decent bit of English to us, just to make sure we're understanding these grammar concepts. They would explain the concepts in English and then switch to Russian. And they'd say, let me show you how this looks in the actual Russian. So the instruction aspect would be in English to make sure you understand it, and then all the practice and application, they would switch to Russian. But then we would do things where we would have, okay, wait, let's take a step back. The course itself was divided into 3 semesters. And in each semester, you'd have a main theme. So the first semester for Russian, we did history. The second semester, we did geography. And the third semester was culture. So take the history class. The entire lesson was in Russian. And we really didn't understand anything. I learned how to say the pencil is on the desk. And the teacher started telling us about Soviet history. And they know you don't understand most of what's being said, but it would get you familiar with hearing the language. You have workbooks with the text in front of you, so you're trying to match what you're hearing with what you're reading.
Yeah, so having the context for that would obviously be helpful, knowing the topic. I like that as you progress on the course, the teachers speak less and less English, and eventually no English. There will also be an hour during the day with a military instructor talking about military-specific things. I imagine the vocabulary in general to be quite specific in the military. I wonder, are there any constraints on what's taught?
There was a little bit. For example, we didn't learn a lot of religious words, but we did a lot of political words. The language program itself is 63 weeks long. And so in that time frame, we cover about 3 years of college level language. So by the time we're done in our 63 weeks, then we're pretty fluent in a lot of different areas. Politics, communication, media. There's a lot of things that we did learn that was specific for our job, but not as much as you would think at DLI. We had a second school in Texas where we did more job-related language.
And that's obviously the Air Force School in Texas. I believe they break the day's lessons into 1-hour blocks for reading, listening, and speaking skills. So how do these lessons work?
Смотри, сейчас в интернете куча предложений, онлайн-профессий, таргетолог, продюсер, дизайнер там и прочее. Это очень конкурентный рынок, и на нем реально мало кто зарабатывает более 100 тысяч рублей. И при этом есть...
We'd have 1 hour with one teacher who would teach us about a specific grammar point, and then the next hour would be about, like how in English we have Latin roots, in Korean there are Chinese roots. We spent a whole hour learning specific roots so that we could expand and have an easier time recognizing words.
Okay, so they start you off with simple sentences and important words, eventually talking more and more about word roots, conjugations, noun declensions, and so on.
When we learned Korean, we started with basic words and phrases like hello, how are you? nice to see you again, and that sort of thing. And then it built on that and learned the grammar bit later and kept adding more vocabulary to what we already had. And learning whole sentences rather than individual words and phrases. You can learn grammar much better by learning the whole and then breaking it down.
I obviously completely agree that starting with full sentences is the best way to learn. A typical exercise they give you at this stage is something like this. Here is your root word. Now here is a sentence. Figure out what form of this word is correct for the sentence. And with a language like Arabic, it's really important to choose the right prefixes and suffixes, or the meaning, in a military context at least, very often changes to something quite different. And you certainly don't want to be saying the wrong thing out in the field. Now the method is known for making heavy use of structured repetition. So if the students are given 25 new words to learn for a test, then all day those words will come up in the grammar lessons over and over again. And it goes like this constantly with lots of reinforcement. Now here's something that you won't get a lot of other language schools, and it's pretty cool. Dialects in a language are taught right from the beginning in the classroom. So if you're learning Arabic, for example, you'll get 1 to 2 hours of foundational, modern standard Arabic each day, for example, but then you'll get trained in various dialects of Arabic. Mind you, a lot of soldiers these days are first learning the dialects in the field and then picking up standard Arabic at the school afterwards. And learning these dialects is so important.
Picture this. You're supporting ground operations, and you get some intelligence that says your unit is about to walk into an ambush. You're not going to have time to use a dictionary, consult the internet, or run it through a whole chain of command to QC your work. It's just you, and the confidence in your abilities.
You are, of course, in safe hands. All these instructors are bilingual and know how to explain even the most difficult grammar or idiomatic expressions for those dialects. So let's explore the structure and goals of the program. At the DLI, there are 4 levels to reach native speaker fluency, although you can go even higher if you want to. But in order to pass and graduate, you just have to reach level 2, which means being able to understand the gist of a conversation or accurately pick out the facts from like a news broadcast, for example, who, what, when, where, why. At level 3, your understanding can become far more intuitive. You can pick up on someone's intent and motive and so on. Whether you reach that level or not, well, is up to you. But certain jobs are going to require that level of understanding, like CIA, for example. So what is the primary skill that most people in the program focus on? Is it a speaking practice?
Yes, there was a lot of speaking practice in class. Our tests were always listening, reading, and speaking. The goal was always to improve speaking alongside of the other skills, but our final test at the end of the course was more weighted towards listening and reading than speaking.
And this makes sense for Elle, obviously, because her future job is going to entail mostly listening in Korean. But guys who will be operating in military attachment capacities, for example, will naturally need a lot more speaking practice to prepare themselves. So it really depends on what they're going to be doing in the field. And then, as you progress, you do more and more comprehension work, looking for meaning in texts, making deductions based on things that are said. And this kind of work will be familiar to my students in my story learning programs, because working on understanding and uncovering the language from a context is the main priority, using story in that case. But I am interested to see how they balance speaking versus comprehension at the DLI, because I can see how learning to say stuff can be absolutely critical in the field from the beginning. You can imagine the need to give very clear commands in another language. But being able to understand what's going on, read a difficult situation, all together with cultural nuance, I mean, that's the really difficult and really important stuff. You can't win hearts and minds, after all, if you don't understand how the hearts and minds themselves work. So, next question. What does your self-study time look like?
So self-study, we had a lot of homework that we had to do. We had anywhere between 20 and 80 new vocabulary words to memorize every night, usually longer over the weekend. We had some sort of recording we had to make of ourselves speaking in the language. Oftentimes we had transcription homework where we would listen to a recording and then transcribe what we heard. I think there were some other smaller types that were less common, but those were the 3 big ones. And a lot of the professors recommended also watching the news in Korean, watching dramas, TV shows, and listening to the music and that sort of thing. And me in particular, since I was already interested in the music, that's what I did a lot. Sometimes instead of homework, and I would have to do it early in the morning. I spent a lot of time listening to the sounds of the natural speakers, and I have stacks and stacks of books in Korean that I have read or am trying to read.
Reading books in Korean, of course, I strongly approve, although I have no idea whether they use this at the DLI, probably not. But actually, there is a huge library of free military training resources that you have open access to, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But first, you're going to love this.
Attention, tu peux prendre le risque de quitter cette vidéo, mais sache qu'elle disparaîtra et tu ne retomberas peut-être jamais dessus. Ou alors tu peux la regarder, et elle peut changer ta vie. Oui, j'ai pas peur de dire ça, regarde, c'est Amaury qui le dit, à une pub YouTube de changer de vie. Et Armel a dit pareil, je suis vraiment heureuse d'avoir vu cette pub YouTube et d'avoir cliqué dessus, merci. À cet instant précis, 91% des gens sont retournés sur YouTube.
Now check this out. At the DLI, they have what they call an isolation immersion facility.
öğretilen
or ISO immersion, sure, where students can live for up to 3 days, sometimes up to 5 days. It's basically a chance to interact in a more realistic environment, which is very cool. There are kitchens, sleeping quarters, and things like that. You'll be isolated in a world where only your new language is understood, and you'll have to practice real-world situations like haggling at a market for food for whatever you need, or going through customs, making hotel reservations on the phone. Quite cool.
For Russian, the teachers would set up scenarios like one time they made it seem like we were going through an airport. We had to go through that speaking Russian. But there'd be some kind of variable that would get thrown in. The security guard would be angry because we were missing some documents or something. They build little scenarios. They're kind of like mini speaking days to practice using the language. So even if you don't get to travel to those countries, they still set up those kind of opportunities.
And all of this is designed to help bring an appreciation for culture, obviously. There are cooking days, dressing in traditional clothes, storytelling days where you hear about legendary warriors and heroes. It's really quite something. All in all, each graduating class goes through 3 of these immersion events during their course. See, maybe that's what we've been missing out on all in all. We should be dressing up and cooking exotic food. I think that's the secret. But seriously, going the extra mile like this really does wonders for not just absorbing the language, but understanding the culture too. Because remember that some of these recruits are only 17 years old. They've never left home. I mean, when I remember back to what I was like when I was 17, I knew nothing at 17. I certainly knew nothing about the world. So it's not just about the language. There's a lot more that you need to prepare these kids for. And I'm fairly sure that that's what the military had in mind when it introduced this next feature, simulations. Now imagine that you've been deployed and your task is to go out and hire interpreters to help troops in the field, or maybe negotiate a border crossing. Well, that is what simulations are designed to prepare you for. Here's a role-play scene in a mock village. See if you can figure out what's going on. Well, those serious faces were no joke. They do take it very seriously, don't they? So I'm curious, how do you think that you would get on with this kind of training in your classes? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, I know that we do have military people watching this channel, so if there's anything here that you feel like not quite got right or misrepresented in any way, please do this kind of joke. That is what simulation troops in the field, or maybe and your task is to go out and hire interpreters to help troops in the field, or maybe negotiate a border crossing. Well, that is what simulations are designed to prepare you for. Here's a role-play scene in a mock village. See if you can figure out what's going on. Those serious faces were no joke. They do take it very seriously, don't they? So I'm curious, how do you think that you would get on with this kind of training in your classes? Let me know in the comments. And by the way, I know that we do have military people watching this channel, so if there's anything here that you feel like not quite got right or misrepresented in any way, please do let me know in the comments. And for some languages, you can even do an immersion trip abroad. In fact, 15% of students are selected for an overseas trip of some kind, which has got to be extremely motivating.
Going to Korea was always a big motivation for me. And I did get to go in the middle of training. Oftentimes they send students for 6 weeks to study at one of the universities there as a foreign exchange program. And that was a really great experience and made me even more enthusiastic about completing the course and returning.
What about Jack's experience?
So about halfway through the course, there was a small group of us that got to go on a language exchange to Latvia. And being there, walking around, not hearing English anywhere, like the first time going to a restaurant, communicating an idea and having them understand it was like, wow, we actually know what's going on. Before that, you're constantly doing grammar and exercises. You have all these worksheets and homework and all that. And so you're kind of in this little box the entire time. And so on our first opportunity to go out and use the language, we were thinking, this is kind of cool. It's not bad. It was good motivation moving forward.
Hallo, liebe Anlegerinnen und Anleger. Ja, ich bin es, Harry Weinfurt. Keine Sorgen, Sie sollen heute keine Preise erraten. Ich will Ihnen auch nichts verkaufen, ganz im Gegenteil. Heute wird...
And this language exchange was 5 or 6 months in. How did the soldiers do?
It takes more than 5 months to get really comfortable. But I could get around, I could travel, go get a bus, go to restaurants, have basic conversations, you know. But yeah, it was nice motivation to move forward from that.
Cool. So I thought I'd quickly show you a typical day's schedule at the DLI, just to get an overview of what it's like. And a hint here, if you think the only work after class is a healthy run around the track in army boots, well, you're going to be wrong. First of all, remember, this is proper military, which means all military rules apply. At 5:30 a.m., or should that be 05:30? I don't know. Anyway, you wake up, you make your bed. Yep, just like this. Then you have to do chores, take out the trash, and all before breakfast. You have to be at the parking lot by 7 a.m. for reveille and formation, and when formation ends, you have 25 minutes before class. Classes then go on till 3:30 in the afternoon, with a lunch break, of course, you get that. And at 3:30, when the day's classes are over, you must quickly get into your PT uniform and hustle to get to the proper venue for an hour of physical training. Then, of course, it is dinner time. 7 p.m. is mandatory study hall time. You can go to the library if you want, but otherwise it's in your room with the door open, studying. Yeah, so this is probably also a good time to finish your homework. Now it might be 9 p.m. by the time study time ends, but then you have to go to iron your uniform and get your boots clean because at 9:45 there is bed check formation. And if you think you can get to sleep after that, not a chance. It is study hour again. See, I bet most of you are now appreciating the absolute luxury of learning a language from your living room, right? Anyway, where were we? Curfew is at 10 p.m., but by this hour, I have no doubt that these guys and girls are pretty much passing out. But only if their homework is done, of course. And then it is sleep and repeat. And I bet they are looking forward to Saturdays because you do get weekends, right, guys?
On the weekends, usually people are pretty good with trying to go blow off steam, go travel somewhere, do something good. But also, you have this cloud over you at all times. Like, I could be studying my verbs or something like that. You feel guilty not doing homework because that's all you do all year.
I am all for blowing off steam and not just studying verbs on the weekend, let me tell you. But before you decide that this is definitely not for you, let me tell you about one really fun aspect of the training at DLI, which is the students will prepare for an annual open house in May, which is called, appropriately enough, Language Day. Several thousand visitors come to this event, and you may even have been to one yourself, in which case I want to hear all about it in the comments. I think that looks absolutely awesome. I would have a language day too. Can we get a language day for story learning? How would that work? I've got no idea. Now, after all the grueling work, PT, struggles, bonding, the final day comes, day where it all comes down to 2 words, pass or fail. And the nerves are pretty high, obviously, especially for the speaking part.
The stress of that, ugh, the nerves were pretty high, especially the speaking one. Because you go into this room and 2 native Russian speakers are sitting there with a microphone, and you just start talking, you know?
So what words of advice can our soldiers offer for someone about to go to DLI?
Finding something about the language to love, something that you can be enthusiastic about, that will help you get through learning the language, because it is really hard, and the language program is meant to push you really hard, and lots of students get washed back or get dropped out and sent to another job. So if you find something that you can love about the language or about your target country, then that will really help you.
Definitely true for any language learning mission. And Jack?
You're there for a while, so have fun. The big thing to do is, and this is what I tell people even now, like when we get a new person into our squadron who's just coming out of training, appreciate where you are. Because first off, there's so many people who would love to have the opportunity to go to DLI and learn a language. And on top of it, you're getting paid to learn a language. So appreciate being there, you know? It's such an amazing thing. The fact that when you're in class, there's this native speaker who's personally teaching you this language. That's a very, very unique opportunity. So just enjoy it. Think about how cool it is that you're there right now. The fact that it's tied to our career adds a bit of pressure to it, but ultimately, you're studying a way to explore new aspects of the world.
Relax, enjoy it, and be grateful. I like that. Now, I know a lot of people watching this will be saying, man, I would happily pay whatever it takes to be able to take this amazing intensive training. So as promised, here are 2 resources that you are going to love, direct from the Defense Language Institute itself. Firstly, you've got GLOSS. This is a global language online support system. And recruits from the DLI can use this to listen to a weather forecast in Honduras, go through a Spanish accent library, listen to recordings of Albanian conversations. It is an incredible resource. Best of all, anyone can tap into this online. The link is in the description below. But there is more, because remember the DLAB test I told you about earlier, the one in the made-up language, the entrance exam? Well, if you want to experience that, you can actually buy a practice DLAB test right off Amazon. Again, link in the description. But remember that the US military are not the only ones teaching languages intensively like this. Mormon missionaries are also doing some incredible stuff over in Utah. And if you click this video, you can see exactly what it is.
Возвращать процентов кредиту клиенту, который пользуется картой халва, это наш принцип. Совкомбанк.